of political cooperation on the ground. The Indian Ocean region is the junction and fruitful place of the Belt and Road Initiative. The China-Maldives Friendship Bridge, the 750 kilometers long Djibouti-Addis Ababa railway is connecting Djibouti and Ethiopia together. The 500 kilometer long Mombasa-Nairobi railway in Kenya, and among many other projects built with the participation of China around the Indian Ocean region, are results of pragmatic cooperation within the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. All these facilitate greatly to the connectivity of infrastructure, goods, and people in the region. The Belt and Road Initiative is originated in China, while the opportunities and achievements belong to the world. China is willing to jointly further build the initiative with countries in the Indian Ocean region with more efficiency and higher quality. The fourth Indian Ocean Conference theme on securing the Indian Ocean region, traditional and non-traditional challenges, focusing on issues of maritime ecology, terrorism, and navigational security. All these three topics are very important for the sustainable development of the Indian Ocean region. China hopes to build a peaceful, opening, cooperating, inclusive, prosperous, and sustainable Indian Ocean region with joint efforts, and China is ready to strengthen cooperation with the regional countries in the above-mentioned fields through bilateral and multilateral mechanisms for win-win results, common development, and a community of shared future. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I have the hand of Admiral Sinha for the first question.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador, for your very exhaustive explanation. And I think some of it also answers the question which Ambassador Yuri had made. The Indo-Pacific, why is it not inclusive? So it is very much inclusive of everybody, and that is our Prime Minister's stand in the Shangri-La dialogue last year. I have just two questions really, or a comment. As you said, the anti-piracy missions have been sent by China into the Gulf of Aden. But as a retired naval officer, I don't understand what is the role of submarine being deployed. What is the role of submarine being deployed in anti-piracy patrol? Ships I can understand, but submarines I really haven't figured out so far. Yeah. Okay. Second is that you mentioned that terrorism is a common threat to everyone, including that to China. Then I was wondering as to what took China so long to declare a terrorist like Masood Azhar and kept blocking, the declaration in the United Nations Security Council. It's a very well-known fact. So maybe you can address these two questions.
Okay, thank you for your questions. For the first question, you're talking about the submarines deployed to the area, right? I myself, I'm not aware of that, but my knowledge is that all we deploy there just the Navy escort team. So this, I'm not aware of this. Second one, you're talking about the Kashmir, right? That problem in Security Council? Is that?
No, 1267. This is the UN Security Council 1267 resolution, which notifies people as terrorists. The very famous terrorist who China had blocked from being notified for about 4 years. His point was, why was it delayed? That's all. If you know the answer, it's fine. Otherwise, we'll move on.
The problem, I didn't get your point. That's the problem.
There's a terrorist called Masood Azhar.
Masood Azhar.
Yeah, a Pakistani terrorist, whom we tried to get notified, sanctioned under UN Security Council Resolution 1267. And China for 4 years said we need more discussions. Yes. And he was finally sanctioned only now. If terrorism is the common enemy of all of us, why did China delay it by 4 years? That is the question.
I think China has its policy. I think, of course, I think it's common knowledge. I think also recognized by the international community of terrorism is a common enemy. I think it's no problem with that. You talk about this case. I think also China's own maybe consideration. I'm not very aware of that. Thank you.
May I request, I have 4 or 5 names here. May I request everybody to be very quick and short with the questions. Admiral Sikri, please. I have Admiral Sikri, I have Mr. Bhasin, and I have Prabha Rao in my list. So let's be very, very brief.
Thank you. Ambassador, you mentioned about how China has crucial interest in the Indian Ocean and why it is so active. You also talked about the historical cultural contacts. I'm not sure that the cultural contacts of China in the Indian Ocean are that extensive. I'm sure that you would recognize that the Indian cultural contacts in China and your East Asia are much more. But leave that aside. The bigger point I wanted to make was that if China is so active in the Indian Ocean because you have active vital interests there, would you also not concede that Tibet is also a place where a lot of countries and people have vital interests? All the countries of South Asia and Southeast Asia and depend on the waters that rise in Tibet and flow down. And there is a great concern that what is happening in Tibet could affect the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people in South and Southeast Asia. But when it comes to Tibet, you say, no, nobody can say anything about it, although if China continues with its policies in Tibet, it could actually lead to a serious conflict. So in the same spirit as you have an interest in the Indian Ocean because you think it's a global commons, I think a lot of countries in Asia also feel the same way about Tibet. Your comments, please.
Thank you very much for this question. The first one, I think, yes, I think China has very traditional cultural links with this region, I think, even with India, of course, with other countries. I think a lot of exchange between the two countries since ancient time. I think this is nothing, no problem with that. The second one is that, yes, we are talking Tibet. Tibet is one of the Chinese provinces. It's, for the past, this year we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the new Tibet, democratic reform in Tibet. For the past 60 years, Tibet has achieved a lot, great achievements, progress, economic development, social progress, as well. So, and talking about some countries have concerns on this. I think maybe you have some concerns, even some differences among the country, and this view also may be different opinion on that. I think we can, as I mentioned, that we advocate the settlement of disputes or problems through friendly consultation and negotiation. So I think China and the country concerned or party concerned have the, capability and wisdom, enough wisdom to solve this problem amicably, if this problem exists. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last question, Mr. Bhasin, can you be very brief and quick to the point? Very brief.
Excellency, you mentioned the 4 Ps: peaceful development, cooperative development.
Just ask the question. Please just ask the question.
No, it's the basis of the question. 4 Ps: peaceful development, cooperative development, open development, win-win development. For whom? And then...
But that's it. That's it.
No, 1 minute. In the investments under the OBOR or BRI, how sustainable, how does China view the sustainability, and how does China protect the security of these investments?
I got your first question, but second one.
Second question is the investments made in BRI, how to protect it? That's
How
all.
do you protect their sustainability
Okay.
and their security?
Okay. I mentioned yes for development. Yes, I can. These four development, I think, are very important. I think open development, peaceful, cooperative development, and other developments. I think these are very important for not only China. I think China upholds the development, the path of development based on peaceful development. You know, I don't go in deep in this. You know, if you look at history, you know, some countries made the development through maybe, how can I say, maybe aggressive, maybe and expand to other country and other and like this. But China, our doctrine, our principle is that China, for the past 70 years, China will celebrate the 17th anniversary of the founding of People's Republic of China. For the past 70 years, China has made a big change, you know, social progress, economic development, and become the second GDP, second economy in the world. Obviously, we develop ourselves in the base of peaceful development, not through harassment, not through war, not through aggression in other countries. This is what we call the peace development. Cooperative development. It's very simple. We need to cooperate in this world. Need to cooperate. Need to come together to talk, to negotiate, to cooperate in different fields for a common prosperity. This, I think, is very similar. And you are talking about the BNI initiative. Yes, you know, now I mentioned that we have signed MOU or agreements and we've got positive response for over 160 countries, regional and international organizations. And we have had many cooperation with them. I think I can see as along these two BNI initiative, this scheme, I think, yes, we provide assistance to them and we provide loans and of course different kind of assistance and this cooperation, I think, is very fruitful and also it's very welcome. I think it's very welcome by this country and also organizations concerned. I think are welcome in this country. I think, and of course, during the cooperation, during the joint ventures, I think there will be maybe some problem like this bill or some you get some how to protect the interest and so and so. I think first, I think these problems maybe there's three dimensions. Maybe one is maybe come from China, maybe come from the certain country. Then it from the cooperation with the two countries. So we acknowledge the problems sometimes or even differences. But we will settle this problem friendly. We will negotiate with them, consult with them for the benefits of the two nations and two people, and for the common development of the two nations and two peoples. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We are right now running only 15 minutes behind schedule. The morning session went half an hour fast. We're running behind schedule. And this discussion, of course, can go on forever. So I think our host wants to give a small token to Ambassador Hongtian. May I request Vijay Lakshmi to kindly do the honors. A loud applause, please. Thank you very, very much. Our last speaker for the first half of the thing is Ambassador Harry Harris, the U.S. Ambassador to South Korea. He was earlier the commander, as Admiral Harris, he was the commander of the U.S. Pacific Command, as it was then known as. He has worked in this part of the world earlier also, as Assistant to the Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, and his many, many achievements. Born in Japan, Ambassador, the floor is yours. And we had two speakers who aroused a lot of questions. Now for the third.
So I'll be fast. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to be with you at this, the fourth Indian Ocean Conference. I guess this is the former Cold War super panel power. But thank you, India Foundation and RSIS. Congratulations to President Sola for his victory and last year's elections and to the Maldivian commitment to the democratic process. The U.S. looks forward to working closely with Maude on our shared interests in a free and open Indo-Pacific. The Indian and Pacific Oceans are where the future of the Earth will be determined. Even today, the trade routes through these seas form the central arteries of the global economy, with over 60% of all maritime trade passing through these waters. Strategically, virtually all of the world's key maritime choke points face the Indo-Pacific, from the Panama Canal to the Strait of Malacca to the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb and the Strait of Hormuz. Changes in our climate threaten the region, as all of you here in Maldives know all too well. This region is already one of the greatest engines of global economic growth, and 4 of the world's 6 largest economies are found here: China, Japan, India, and of course the United States. The ASEAN community is the fastest growing economic zone in the world, and the concentration of population and economic activity in this region will present special challenges in regard to the demand for food, for energy, for housing, and most importantly, for freedoms. It's no exaggeration to say that the future of the globe depends on the choices made today in the Indo-Pacific. And folks, if you're wondering why the U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Korea is speaking with you all today, well, me too. I suppose it could be that this is an area of the world I've visited and thought about across a 40-year military career. In my previous job as the U.S. Indo-PACOM commander, I spoke at the first 3 Raisina dialogues in India and the Gal dialogue in Sri Lanka in 2017. So I'm familiar somewhat with the challenges that you face here in the Indian Ocean. So I'm going to speak to you today through the twin lenses of my past life as the U.S. Indo-PACOM commander and my current life as the U.S. ambassador to South Korea. So ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake about it. The United States is an Indo-Pacific nation. Always has been and always will be. To Raja Mohan's point, there is no retrenchment, sir. We are part of the region geographically. Much of our citizenry, me included, are from the region. Our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen are buried across the region, and our future is inextricably linked to the region. American engagement as investor, producer, consumer, stabilizer has contributed to the economic momentum that we see in the region today. Our robust relationships in the Indo-Pacific include 3 free trade agreements and 14 trade and investment framework agreements. The U.S. alone conducted over $1.8 trillion, and that's trillion with a T, in two-way trade with the Indo-Pacific in 2017. The Trump administration remains focused on building strong, reciprocal, and balanced bilateral trade and investment relationships throughout the region. The value of U.S. foreign direct investment in the region has more than doubled in the last decade and today stands at nearly $1 trillion. In fact, no country has invested more in this region than the United States. Importantly, unlike some other countries that I won't name, when we invest, we create jobs, not debt, both in the region and in the United States. Today, U.S. investment supports over 5.1 million jobs in the Indo-Pacific region. What we bring forward is a vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. President Trump announced this vision in Vietnam in 2017. Secretary Pompeo built on it on the Indo-Pacific Business Forum last summer. Vice President Pence further expanded the details in his speech at the APEC in Papua New Guinea last fall. We believe that the Indo-Pacific nations should be independent, strong, and satellites to none, underpinned by the 3 pillars of economics, security, and governance. This is how we intend to work with our friends, allies, and partners. And we followed our words with actions. Initiatives like the U.S. Build Act, the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, and the Transaction Advisor Fund demonstrate in concrete terms our real commitment to this region and our determination to fight for our principles. These efforts will unlock billions of dollars from the private sector for investments in the region and will bolster Indo-Pacific countries' abilities to implement sustainable, transparent, and high-quality infrastructure projects. As the U.S. Ambassador in Seoul, I'm blessed to witness firsthand an ever-vibrant and growing partnership that boasts a long record of success. In 1953, the Republic of Korea made choices. They chose democracy, an alliance with the United States, and close partnership with other free and open countries. The North made a different choice. The outcomes speak for themselves. Together, the U.S. and the Republic of Korea have worked to produce one of the greatest economic success stories the world has known. This alliance continues to serve as the foundation for peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula and as the cornerstone for security and stability throughout the region. Of course, North Korea continues to pose a persistent challenge with its UN-proscribed weapons programs, but we're in a far more optimistic place today than we were just over a year and a half ago when I wore a different uniform. We witnessed 3 meetings now between President Moon Jae-in and Chairman Kim Jong-un, and 3 meetings between President Trump and Chairman Kim. Developments that were unimaginable just a short time ago. The strength of the U.S.-ROK alliance and our unity and advancing mutual hopes for peace, prosperity, and stability on the Korean Peninsula and more broadly in the Indo-Pacific is evident. But Korea obviously isn't the only success story in the region. Just look at our relationship with Japan. Once a bitter enemy, today Japan is one of our greatest partners. Together, we overcame the divisions of the past to forge an exceptionally close partnership as we work hand in hand to bring peace and prosperity to many parts of the globe. For a more recent example, consider Vietnam. We fought a fierce, long war against the Vietnamese, but since normalization of relations in 1995, our relationship has completely changed. Today, Vietnam is a close partner. Finally, consider our relationship with India. The U.S.-India relationship has finally lived up to the promise President Eisenhower saw in his 1959 visit, when he said that, quote, "Between the oldest democracy on the earth and the largest lie 10,000 miles of land and ocean. But in our fundamental ideas and convictions about democracy, we are very close neighbors," unquote. In 2004, the U.S.-India relationship transformed into a strategic partnership under the leadership of former President Bush and Prime Minister Vajpayee. I share U.S. Ambassador to India Ken Juster's evaluation that the current U.S.-India relationship is as broad, complex, and rich in substance as any bilateral relationship in the world. We went from rarely talking to each other to not only talking together, but building action together. Skepticism, suspicion, and doubt on both sides have been replaced by cooperation, dialogue, and trust. Our Indo-Pacific vision is about developing such deep and respectful relationships based on security, respect for the rule of law, and mutually beneficial economic development. I submit to you that these ideas resonate throughout the region, though sadly are not extant everywhere in the region. But we can aspire, and we together can accomplish much. I see a convergence between our closest partners around this idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific. These values are reflected in President Moon's new Southern policy for expanding engagement with South and Southeast Asia. Under his pillars of peace, prosperity, and people, this initiative demonstrates a shared vision for the region that highlights a natural harmony with our own Indo-Pacific vision. And Prime Minister Maude at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore last year put forth a similar vision when he described India's Act East policy. And he said, and I quote, "When the oceans are open, the seas are secure, countries are connected, and the rule of law prevails, and the region is stable, nations, small and large, prosper as sovereign countries," unquote. This is precisely the rationale for the U.S. Indo-Pacific vision, which Prime Minister Maude acknowledged as an important pillar of the U.S.-India global relationship. The same principles are found in Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. Japan believes that a free and open maritime order in the Indo-Pacific region includes the promotion and establishment of the rule of law, freedom of navigation, free trade, economic prosperity, and commitment to peace and stability. These principles are international public goods, which will bring stability and prosperity to the region as a whole. Australia's a stable and prosperous Indo-Pacific strategy focuses on dispute resolution in accordance with international law, open markets, economic integration, freedom of navigation and overflight, protection of small states, and cooperation with underscored its focus on inclusive, equitable, and collective growth. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now briefly speak about China. China is a great power, an economic powerhouse, and a cultural center of gravity. The United States partners well with China on a number of important fronts, including counter-piracy here in the Indian Ocean and the ongoing efforts to achieve the final fully verified denuclearization of North Korea. But the United States and China function that the United States rejects foreign policy based on leverage and dominance and seeks instead to strengthen relationships based on respect, equal footing, and fair exchange. You can see that divergence of values and how China is treating Muslim Uyghurs, its own citizens, in Western China. In fact, the Chinese Communist Party has exhibited extreme hostility to all religions and religious faiths since its founding. China's diplomacy seeks to force ASEAN members to define codes of conduct in the region as dictated by Beijing and conforming to Chinese standards. You can see intimidation in China's militarization of the South China Sea in defiance of international law. As Secretary Pompeo said, quote, China's bullying in the South China Sea reflects a broader choice for nations in the region, coercion and control or freedom and the rule of law, unquote. China's continuing interference with and escalatory behaviors toward Vietnam's longstanding oil and gas activities in Vietnam's EEZ is deeply concerning. This calls into serious question China's commitment, including in the ASEAN-China Declaration on the Code of Parties in the South China Sea to the peaceful resolution of maritime disputes. You can see it in the predatory economic policies behind China's One Belt, One Road initiative, which ignores international norms on transparency and entices countries into a debt trap that leaves them vulnerable to coercion and threatens their sovereignty. Now, let me stress that despite our concerns about its actions, we do not seek to contain China. We enjoy a productive bilateral economic relationship with China, as do many, if not most, countries in the world. This is right and good. We welcome China's participation in a rules-based international order, and we remind Beijing frequently of the prosperity that that order has created for China, liberating hundreds of millions of people and lifting billions of people out of poverty. As my good friend and ambassador to the Maldives and Sri Lanka, Elena Teplitz says, the world is safer and more secure when strong, sovereign, and capable nations partner together. The United States is working to expand economic opportunity around the world because we know that transparency and inclusive economic growth improves lives. We believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, unquote. I wish I was as good with words as Ambassador Teplitz is. Together, moving forward, these words permeate almost everything the United States seeks to do in the region. Or, as my Indian friends would say, Sath Sath Age Shalen. Together, moving forward. I think you're laughing because I mispronounced that terribly, and I admit that. No, together,
very good job.
Together, moving forward. Standing up for values that ensure our joint security and prosperity, linking Americans and Asians generation to generation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've talked too long, so let me close with this thought. We seek relationships throughout the Indo-Pacific region, relationships underpinned by the rule of law, sovereignty, a commitment to fair and reciprocal trade, open commerce, and the freedom of navigation. Only in this way can we together uphold the principles that allow all of us to enjoy security and prosperity and enable us to face challenges of the future with confidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In fact, when we organized the first Indian Ocean, again, let's be very, very quick and short questions. Don't give us, others, everybody, don't give us long introductions.
Right. Well, I was just apologizing to the Russian speaker because thought I was being a little difficult. But I will not apologize to you, Ambassador Harris, when I say that the U.S. has been a force for good, as you said, in most of the Indo-Pacific. But you don't refer to the western reaches of the Indian Ocean, where your current policy, both with respect to Iran and Afghanistan and Pakistan, worry us in India. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, no, other than, I came here to talk about the Indo-Pacific vision that we have. But I believe, though, that our stance on Iran is correct, that Iran's actions and their nuclear development are wrong. And we must take strong action to ensure that Iran does not successfully develop a nuclear weapon, nor the means to deliver it, which threatens not only the United States, but I believe the rest of the world. With regard to Afghanistan, I think that we're in the right place there. President Trump has indicated his desire to look at downsizing I guess downsizing our commitment there, and that's being looked at. But I think that we are in the right there in Afghanistan.
Thank you. I would disagree with Sanjay on the Afghanistan part, but I'll leave it aside. Janata Hasna.
Compliments to you. This is General Atta Hasnan. I'm a graduate of your former institution, the Asia Pacific Center, which you functioned under your command at one time. My question to you is, the United States is still the world's only superpower. It doesn't have the capacity to be able to look after Europe, Middle East, Central Asia, the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific all simultaneously. You ended with the Cold War in '89. You went into the Gulf War, pulled out of it, triumphal in both, but thereafter got yourself embroiled in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and the entire purpose of having to move towards the Asia-Pacific, then Asia-Pacific, somehow just vanished. Why is it that the United States does not perceive that this future threat lies in here, in the Indo-Pacific? You're once again threatening to get back against Iran, and this time, if you get stuck with Iran, I can assure you, it's going to be a war of proxies, which is going to involve you for the next 10 years.
So I would agree with you, as I said in my remarks, that the center of gravity is in the Indo-Pacific. And I would also emphasize what I said in my remarks, that the United States is an Indo-Pacific country, always has been and always will be. There was never retrenchment. There was a different descriptor for it. For a while it was the pivot and then the rebalance. But whatever you call it, the U.S. never reduced our level of effort nor level of commitment to the Indo-Pacific. We managed, because of the size of our country and economy, to also do some of the other things that you talked about. We had to get involved in Afghanistan. We were attacked by entities that came from Afghanistan. We believe that we were making the right decision in Iraq, in Gulf War II, in 2003. So we were able to do that with a coalition of many nations to help us in both, and that alone recognizes that going it alone is difficult. So, and to the final point, I'll just say that you are right about America's commitments around the globe, and that is why this administration, President Trump's administration, is seeking a more reciprocal and equitable distribution of responsibilities amongst our friends, allies, and partners.
We have two more speakers. Dr. Yan Yan, and then Ambassador Hongtian. Dr. Yan Yan, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. I have two simple questions. The first one is regarding what you mentioned about China and Vietnam's recent issue in the Vanguard Bank. Well, because the previous State Secretary used to say that the United States has a neutrality policy regarding the South China Sea issue, and that you won't take sides on the territorial and maritime disputes in the South China Sea. And yet just now, you refer to the Vanguard Bank, the disputed waters as Vietnam Sea. So do you mean that the U.S. policy in the South China Sea has changed? You already take the side of the Vietnam. And my second question is, when you talk about the U.S. has protect of the international order, and may I just ask the U.S. withdraw from the UN's Human Rights Council and the Paris Climate Accord, and also you withdraw from the bilateral arms control agreement with Russia and wants to place more missiles in Asia? Does all that things the protection of the current international order and system? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I'll take them in the order that you asked. Our policy has not changed. We don't take sides in territorial disputes. What we do believe, though, is that the great body of water that is called the South China Sea is international water, that the military bases that China has created out of whole cloth, literally a great wall of sand in the middle of the South China Sea, are illegal. We agree with the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. Even though we're not a signatory to it, we follow it. China, on the other hand, is a signatory to it and chooses to disregard it. We believe that along with the ITLOS Tribunal, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, which I know that you know about more than me, since that is your job, that the ITLOS Tribunal actually ruled there's no efficacy, there's no legitimacy to the 9-dash line, and all the claims there too. With regard to the international accords, I don't want to go down each one of them with you. I'll tell you that I'll mention the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty, the INF Treaty. There were only two signatories to the INF Treaty, us and Russia. We believe that Russia was violating it, and so if Russia is violating it, and China is not a signatory to it, so we can't expect China to follow the INF since you're not a signatory to it, and China doesn't follow those international tribunals of which it is a member, then we believe then that the INF Treaty was essentially self-limiting. So in order to improve our own defensive capability, we gave fair warning, fair notification per the INF Treaty, and then we left that treaty in August.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have questions, but as the American colleague talking about the South China Sea, then human rights, militarization, and freedom navigation, and so bullying even. So as a representative from China, I need to respond. Sorry for that.
Though in the morning Mr. M. Jakper said it reminds him of the United Nations, I don't think so we should get into this bilateral rebuttals now. Because then,
that's not true, no.
If you have a very short point, Ambassador Hongtian, you're most welcome. But if you want to get into rebuttal, then Ambassador Harris may want to respond to you, and then I'll be unfair to the other speakers who are lined up.
We don't hope that mislead the president here. That, okay? 2 minutes. So I think that about the militarization, freedom of navigation, bullying in the Southern China Sea. You know, China has indisputable sovereignty over the Nansha Island in South China Sea and the adjacent water. China's deployment of necessary, you talk about militarization. China's development of necessary facility on Nansha Island, which are our own territory, in defense of a territory, is an inherent right of a sovereign state. I think that's no problem.
You made your point, Ambassador. You made your point. I think so.
Then you're talking about the navigation, freedom of navigation, and China has all along respects and upholds the freedom of navigation and our flight in the South China Sea, enjoyed by all countries in accordance with international law. And for the past Never have not only one case happened for that. Everyone enjoy the freedom of navigation. Nothing happened there. So I need to make.
No, I know. I mean, I can respond to you, but I don't think so.
There.
We are in this mode to score national
Yes.
points.
Yeah,
we are
but
not in, as I said, this is not a UN forum where you score national points.
Yes, bullying. Who is bullying who? Who is bullying who?
Depends on who's asking the question.
In mind, okay?
That's all right. I think you made your point. Ambassador Hongtian, you made your point.
We don't want all of fighting and don't want accusation, but I need to respond. Okay, thank you for that.
Okay. I'm just reminded, and as my last point, for 50 years we kept saying the hegemon, USA should go away. And when the USA started going away, we got nervous. We said, please don't go away. So, depends on who's asking the question at what point of time. So, may I now request Dr. Alok Bansal, Director, India Foundation, to come up and thank Ambassador Harris for his address. Both have worn the white uniform. Thank you, Ambassador Harris. We come to the end of the first part. We are not taking a break. We are continuing with the second part of it. We have 4 more speakers to go. And I will now request Pornpimol Kanchanalak, the advisor to Foreign Minister, Kingdom of Thailand. Kanchan, of course, means gold in all our languages. She has been president of many private and public institutions. She's an MA graduate from philosophy, Pittsburgh, and a PhD student at Stanford. And she's been advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs since 2015. Over to you.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I don't have any specific statement to make, except that after listening to exchanges that happened before I came up here, it reminds me of what my 7-year-old little girl at home asked me one night before going to bed, after watching the plight of the illegal immigrants to many countries. She asked quietly, there won't be any happy ending, will it? So this is what I would the point I would like to make, that everybody in this gathering, knows what the challenges are, old and new. All the narrative that I've heard during the last 2 days and in Hanoi and in the mini forums is all about the new great power and the old internet security, piracy. But in order to get through all these problems, we may need to step back. Everybody needs to step back and no butting head, because doing so risks a lot of miscalculations. If the Bay of Pigs still can remind us anything, it's the risk of brinksmanship and miscalculation. We don't want that to happen to us, to anybody, to any region. That's why Thailand, as chair of ASEAN this year, tried to espouse a new Indo-Pacific outlook that stresses non-confrontational, but shifting confrontation to constructive cooperation. Trade wars, piracies, and many other things are what happens when the global paradigm is shifting. We have to put our head together in order to find some solutions, if not all. Some solutions are perfect. No solutions are perfect. It reminds me of when I was in Washington serving an ambassador, the Thai ambassador there was a Paris Peace Accord to end the Indo-China War. I asked my ambassador after he participated in the peace process and the accord was signed, how could you sign that accord? It's not a peace accord. And he looked at me, he said, you are so green. But eventually, reality will dictate, we'll get it right. I would like to bring your attention to all the new challenges. We heard about the environment problems, all the We used to have rain in Thailand. Now we rarely have rains. We have thunderstorm. The weather pattern has changed. It affects our food stock. It affects our every aspect of our life. Also, we are facing with the revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, the new technology, the arrival of the 5Gs, where the Internet of Things is becoming a reality. Are we prepared to respond to these new challenges? Do we know what it will entail if there's no, with the arrival of AI, with the 5G, everything's connected, where would employment go? We have bigger problem to think about. That's why Thailand, as chair of ASEAN, proposed a new approach. We know the what, we don't know the how. As a small nation, we believe in putting cooperation and putting our head together, and no one is a bad guy, really. It depends on the definition who said it, but keep an open mind and work together to find a solution. And to quote Lao Tzu, he said, "Nature never hurries, yet everything is accomplished." And just recently, an American singer said, "Nature never hurries, but it always arrives on time." Nature is here, remind us all of the bigger challenges we all are facing, that we cannot make anybody a real bad guy, an absolute bad guy, an absolute good guy. Everything is relative. Just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if you did raise some very interesting points, but if nothing else, you really brought down the temperature, I think. Thank you. Are there any questions? I don't see any of us can disagree when she talked about extreme weather. Okay.
Sadika, do you see there's a need for countries to review the international rules-based order? And is that sufficient to deal with the future problems or challenges?
During the ASEAN Summit recently in August, I was on a panel about on technology and innovation. I was the first speaker, but before the forum started, I spoke with a Chinese colleague, a colleague from China who invented Bitcoins and attended G20 about high technology. And he told me it's time that Thailand and ASEAN should take side. The other party has the algorithm. We have the silicon. We spend money buying up silicon in the last 5 years, a lot more than we buy oil. At that point, I told the moderator, I don't want to be the first speaker anymore. I want to be the last, because I want to hear more about this algorithm and Bitcoin, silicon and all that. But it's the reality. And the BRI has moved into space. And it's not only here, it's not only the oceans, it's up there.
Thank you. May now request General Atta Hasnain to come up and express thanks to Ram Pornpimol, Kanchanalak. Thank you very much. You have a flight to catch. We're grateful that you are here with us. And now we're shifting from the bilaterals to a plurilateral. So may I request Mr. Shahidul Islam, Secretary General of BIMSTEC, Secretariat. He took up the position 2 years ago. He's been a career diplomat, the Bangladesh Foreign Service. He's been ambassador to France, desk to UNESCO, South Korea, and many others. Over to you.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a privilege for me to join the 4th edition of the Indian Ocean Conference on the theme Securing the Indian Ocean Region, Traditional and Non-Traditional challenges. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the organizers for inviting me to this conference. In the last 2 days, I have listened with great interest to the deliberations of distinguished speakers on different aspects of the security challenges of the Indian Ocean region. I would therefore focus more on security challenges of the Bay of Bengal and its littoral and adjacent members of BIMSTEC. The Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, which is better known by its acronym BIMSTEC, brings together 7 member states surrounding the Bay of Bengal. The Bay of Bengal being the key transit route between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean is a part of the overall security environment of the greater Indian Ocean region. This has made this conference extremely relevant for BIMSTEC. The Bay of Bengal region, home to more than 1.6 billion population, with combined GDP of more than $3 trillion US, is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. The region is also witnessing an increased level of security threats, both from traditional and non-traditional sources. When BIMSTEC was established in 1997, our leaders advocated for peaceful and progressive development in the region. Subsequently, the leaders have identified fight against terrorism and transnational crime as one of the prerequisites for sustainable growth and maintaining peace in the region. Accordingly, counterterrorism and transnational crime was added as one of the new areas of BIMSTEC cooperation. This sector has now emerged as an active area of engagement among the BIMSTEC member states. With the establishment of mechanisms like the annual meeting of the National Security Chiefs, Joint Working Group on CTTC and its 6 subgroups, introduction of 1.5-track security dialogue, and various other working groups and expert groups, a robust mechanism has been put in place to deal with counterterrorism and transnational crime sector among the member states. 11 meetings and events related to counterterrorism, money laundering, financing of terrorism, trafficking in illicit drugs, intelligence sharing, etc., were held in 2018 under the framework of BIMSTEC. During the 4th BIMSTEC summit held in Kathmandu, Nepal in August 2018, the leaders recognized that terrorism and transnational organized crimes continue to pose a great threat to international peace and security, including in the BIMSTEC countries, and stressed that combating terrorism and transnational organized crimes require sustained efforts and cooperation and comprehensive approach involving active participation and collaboration of member states. Member states have initiated measures for setting norms towards promoting security cooperation in the region. 2 important CTTC conventions have been negotiated by the member states. The BIMSTEC Convention on Cooperation in Combating International Terrorism, Transnational Organized Crime and Illicit Drug Trafficking, which was signed in 2009, has been ratified by 6 of the member states so far. All the member states have also conveyed their readiness to sign the BIMSTEC Convention of Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters. We are also in the advanced stage to finalizing the BIMSTEC Convention against Trafficking in Persons. The first meeting of the National Security Chiefs held in New Delhi, India in 2017 expanded the scope of CTTC cooperation to include drugs, arms and human trafficking, threats in cyberspace, maritime space, natural disaster, sea level rise due to climate change, and other non-traditional security challenges. The national security chiefs emphasized the need to recognize the Bay of Bengal as a common security space. The meeting emphasized the importance of maritime security in view of the overwhelming significance of the Bay of Bengal for the well-being, prosperity, security, and socio-economic development in the BIMSTEC member states. The meeting decided to prepare a comprehensive plan of action to enhance maritime security cooperation among the member states. An ad hoc working group on maritime security has been constituted to discuss maritime security cooperation among the BIMSTEC member states. Prevention of transnational crimes such as illegal fishing, piracy and armed robbery, trafficking of arms, drugs and humans, poaching, etc., through coordinated patrols, multilateral exercise, enhanced port calls, training and institutionalized mechanisms for information sharing are some of the areas which have been proposed under maritime security that may be considered by the working group. The importance of use of emerging space technologies for addressing security challenges on land, sea, and air have also been recognized by the BIMSTEC member states. We'll soon have an expert group meeting on the subject. Two other mechanisms that have been introduced recently on the subject of security cooperation are Track 1.5 Security Dialogue and Dialogue of Think Tanks. These forums are providing useful inputs to the core BIMSTEC mechanisms for appropriate decision-making. Maritime security, including maritime order, capacity building, maritime connectivity, and piracy are some important elements that have been deliberated by these forums. Some of the views on maritime security that have emerged from these deliberations are that rule-based order must be established in the Bay of Bengal, and that there is a need to improve maritime infrastructure by the BIMSTEC member states while sharing the burden of infrastructure development for common prosperity through better connectivity and accessibility. Synergy has to be developed among various global and regional platforms, which, with regard to norms, operating methods, and also on common narratives. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, BIMSTEC member states have high degree of awareness of traditional and non-traditional security threats in the Bay of Bengal region. And they are working closely to develop common perception and common approach to address these threats. Thank you.
Thank you, Master. I think what you did establish the fact that at different levels, various platforms are available, and that we need not look for one large, grand organization or institution or platform to handle all this. That variable geometry does help at different times. I can see Ariful. No, who's there at the back? Ariful, please. Samshul Arifin, please. And then Dr. Raja Mohan. And I have one more hand behind whom I can't see. I can see the hand wave. Samshul Ariful, please.
Thank you, the Secretary General of BIMSTEC, for your deliberation. I have a small question. We have has come through a lot of organizations, multilateral or the regional also. But the fate of the organization sometimes depends on the bilateral issues. Like we have seen the SAARC. What is the condition of SAARC now? The BIMSTEC, the member countries also, if some bilateral issues are affecting the, you see the Bay of Bengal initiatives or the member countries, can this BIMSTEC take some measures or some actions or some program to solve that? or to go ahead with the countries to resolve the issues?
I think a yes or no answer would do. You could just give him a yes or no answer.
Well, the founding document of BIMSTEC, which is the Bangkok Declaration of 1997, it says that this organization wants to add value to the existing bilateral, regional, and international engagements of member states. So that would go to indicate that member states are free to have bilateral engagement to resolve their problems. And unless there is some regional dimension to the problem, and the member states, all of them, feel that this should be discussed in the BIMSTEC, we don't want to hamper or interfere in the bilateral engagement of member states.
Thank you, man. Major Sahib, basic point is don't overload the agenda. Dr. Raja Mohan, please.
I mean, well, the interest in BIMSTEC has grown quite widely, and there is a lot of hope today for the future of the organization. But you know how member states are. I mean, the rhetoric is one thing and action is different. So if, as Secretary General, you have a wish list of 3 things to tell the member states, these 3 things are important to make the organization more effective and more credible, what would those 3 things be?
The popular perception has been that lack of financing is the main problem, but I would say that number 1 is to hold the meetings regularly, because currently it is still a member state driven organization where the program budget is not provided to the Secretariat. So we depend on the member states' generosity to hold meetings, and at times meetings are not being held regularly. So it is very important to carry forward the process, because if we can continue the process, outcome will automatically come, number 1. And number 2 is that there are 14 areas of cooperation now. This is too much. And if we want to bring back focus to the activities of BIMSTEC, then we have to reduce it. And thankfully, during the last BIMSTEC summit, it has been decided that the areas of cooperation will be rationalized and restructured. And Thailand has prepared a concept note on that, and we are working on that. And the third one is, of course, finance. I would not consider financing to be very important now that BIMSTEC has shifted from its initial focus on project-based cooperation to a rule-based and institution-based. In constant interest to fund us, there should be a clear guideline from the member states for the Secretariat how we are going to accept those external funding. Thank you.
Yes, right at the back. And that's the last question. We're running out of time. Next round.
Sir, there's been a lot of talk with regard to the road connectivity between the members of the BIMSTEC, in terms of the protocols with regard to the insurance, with regard to the way people can freely travel between these countries. And, a lot of talk happened, but we have not seen any much progress in terms of agreements or something coming out of it. And also with regard to, the rules. I mean, some countries could have left-hand drive, some could have a right-hand drive. How do you pass through all these countries? There is a lot of talk about it, but we haven't seen the light of the day for that. So is there some thought process in that? And are there thoughts in terms of an economic union or some kind of common economic policies emerging at some point in time?
I think he just said that they want to reduce the agenda.
Yes, but definitely, regardless of this exercise of reducing the areas of cooperation, connectivity and economic cooperation are going to stay in a big way. In fact, connectivity is at the heart of BIMSTEC initiative. So currently what we are doing is that with the assistance of Asian Development Bank, we are developing a master plan for BIMSTEC transport connectivity, which is at the final stage, and it's waiting for the approval of the member states. And once it is done, it's going to be a policy document for the member states to address the bottlenecks where there are, so that there is at least the infrastructural preparedness to have seamless connectivity. So that's going to be important. And second is we are dealing with two connectivity-related agreements. One is the BIMSTEC motor vehicle agreement, and the other one is coastal shipping agreement. BIMSTEC motor vehicle agreement has been negotiated once, and it seems that member states will still have to work a little bit more. Some member states want to have this one, and others say that it's better to have a comprehensive framework agreement first, and then we go to the specific areas. As opposed to that, the situation of coastal shipping agreement is much better. It is supposed to enhance the coastal shipping movement of cargo within 20 nautical miles, and all the member states are very, very optimistic about this agreement, and we are hoping a breakthrough soon.
Thank you.
And about the, of course, FTA, we are negotiating a free trade agreement, and there are many components. One is the trade in goods, which is almost at the final stage. And as you understand, the services and investment will take some time. But if we can complete and conclude the trade in goods agreement, I think it will be at least a semblance of free trade area that you are mentioning. Thank you.
Thank you. May now request you, Praful Ketkar, on behalf of the host, to thank and honor Ambassador Shahidul Islam. We have 2 more speakers to go and 15 minutes. Hence, thank you. Let's give them a big hand. Thank you, Ambassador. Our next speaker is Mr. Richard Maude, the Deputy Secretary, Indo-Pacific from Australia. Indo-Pacific is obvious. He was earlier the Director General of the Office of National Assessments. He was also headed the whole of government task force which drew the Australian White Paper on Foreign Policy. So I guess you'll give us the broad perspective.
Well, thanks very much, Chair, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I want to join with other speakers in thanking the government of Maldives for their very generous and welcoming hosting of this event, and also to thank the India Foundation, RSIS, and the Foreign Service Institute of the Maldives. It's always hard to follow a session in which the major powers are talking. I was tempted to rewrite my remarks, but I'm going to what I hope is a very Australian intervention, which is short, and I'll try and be as practical as I can. I've been invited to talk about both traditional and non-traditional security challenges, but in light of the time, I'm just going to confine myself to making a few points on changing strategic dynamics in the region, to think about how the region might respond to that with a particular focus on regional architecture, and then to conclude with some examples of the contribution that Australia is making. We've heard lots of references over the last day and a half to how our region is changing, and it's very clear that we face a more contested and a more competitive Indian Ocean region, but there's been less discussion of how this competition is manifesting itself, how does this actually look on the ground and on the water, and what risks there are emerging in this more competitive era that we need to collectively manage. So a few thoughts on how this is manifesting itself. Well, we're definitely seeing the emergence of a much more genuinely multipolar region. We still have flashpoints and border disputes, and in some ways they are intensifying, and they are as tense and dangerous as anywhere in the world. Geoeconomics has become a very prominent part of the Indian Ocean region. And by using that term, I mean the use of trade and investment and infrastructure, not just to deliver connectivity and promote economic growth, but also to build influence and secure national economic and political gains. We are seeing the development of strategically significant ports and military facilities across the Indian Ocean. There are now more submarines and more surface combatant naval ships from more countries in these waters. It's a pretty big ocean, so you wouldn't exactly say it's crowded out there, but clearly things are changing, and China is joining India and the United States as an Indian Ocean maritime power. And this is a good example of how things are changing so quickly, in that China's maritime presence here, now permanent in the Indian Ocean, which was touched on briefly before, is now an established part of the region's strategic landscape, and there's no turning back to a simpler era. We're also seeing both hard power and soft power being used in a battle to build influence in the region and to advance national interests. And the risks in this more competitive dynamic are also clear. We could see the emergence of an unstable regional order characterised by high levels of uncertainty. There is the ever-present risk of conflict with potentially devastating effects on economic confidence and growth. We could see a much weaker ability as a region to manage transnational challenges collectively and effectively. And for many states, perhaps, they're also finding it harder to protect their sovereignty and political and economic independence. Or to paraphrase the late Lee Kuan Yew, they're finding it harder to hold on to the space to be themselves. Of course, the Indian Ocean region is not alone in grappling with this set of challenges. We see similar trends in Southeast Asia and even in the Southwest Pacific, and no single response will be sufficient. But a good starting point is to be clear about the kind of Indian Ocean region we want. What is our vision for the future? And as we do for the Indo-Pacific more generally, Australia seeks an Indian Ocean region of sovereign independent states that are open to cooperation based on shared interests but resilient to threats to their security. We want to see a region that's open, inclusive and prosperous, and one in which the rights of all states are respected. Now, a region like this won't evolve of itself. It won't happen by accident. We will have to work for it, and we will have to work very hard for it. It means building a culture of collaboration based on strong norms and rules, and it also means standing up for those rules when they're broken. Which brings me to a couple of quick thoughts about the region's architecture. Is it up to this new era? Is it what we need to help manage these challenges? You could argue that the region's relative past tranquility and lack of homogeneity appears to have left it underprepared. Regional habits of consultation, norms and cooperation have not developed to the extent that they have elsewhere. And IORA is a good case in point. It's the apex regional organisation. It has unique convening power, a number of successive chairs and hosts, India, Australia, Indonesia, South Africa and the UAE have done well in recent years to try and lift IORA's output and sharpen its focus, but it's still largely absent on the world, perhaps even on the regional stage. And in this kind of much more complex regional environment, to focus only on uncontentious issues is to ignore a great deal that matters to the future. And you could make similar arguments about other pieces of Indian Ocean architecture, including the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. I think we can do better than this. So here's a set of ideas, in no particular order, about some things that we could do to improve regional architecture. India's intended regional fusion centre is a good example of what can be done in an area like maritime domain awareness. So working with that fusion centre would be a useful thing for us all to do. A number of speakers have noted the recently released ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Perhaps IORA could do something similar. It would be the way of IORA itself setting out the principles and norms on which it wants regional collaboration to be built. It would be easy for such an exercise to get bogged down into an argument about how to define the geographical boundaries of the Indo-Pacific. That obviously would be a waste of everyone's time. My point is, such a process could focus on norms and principles and much less on geography. There's been some talk of an IORA regional security forum, and this could be a way of ensuring much stronger and regular consideration of regional security issues. Perhaps starting that in a 1.5-track format could help promote confidence in the idea. IORA could, as an organisation, support and promote G20 standards of quality infrastructure. Applying these standards is the best way of ensuring confidence that infrastructure investment from whatever country it comes from is fit for purpose, well built, affordable and managed on fair and transparent terms. IORA could develop and promote models for Indian Ocean economic integration. President Saleh noted yesterday the lack of intra-regional trade. And finally, IORA could help build the capability of its member states to support and apply international maritime law to disputes in the region, or international law, including international maritime law, to disputes in the region. IORA could start speaking up for the region on the global stage. Chair, I was going to make a few points about Australia's approach, but given the time, let me just quote our Foreign Minister briefly about our approach. What we seek to do in this part of the world is help build stronger regional institutions and norms that manage regional peace and security and promote openness. We want to support resilience among regional countries to withstand coercion and shape opportunities in their national interest. And we want to work with partners to protect and shape rules that promote economic growth, trade liberalisation and open markets. And I'll leave my list of things that we're doing in a practical way to support those objectives for another occasion.
Thank you, Mr. Maude. Normally, when an Australian speaks on the cricket field or outside, they're very blunt. But you have been very, what should I say, direct, Dr. Sanjay Baru.
Very simple question. I like what you said about IORA, but what will it take to get IORA to actually walk the path?
Well, it will take the collective will of its members. So, I've just thrown out a bunch of ideas. Some of them would be difficult to pull off. I recognise that. The idea about putting out ideas is to have people engage with them. Of course, none of them will happen if the member states don't want them to happen. But there are a couple of things I think to think about here. One is IORA risks slipping into oblivion if it doesn't act in a much stronger and more determined way to think about the way in which its own region is changing and what kind of things IORA can do as an organisation to help support peace and security. So it's in the interests of IORA's members to find some things to do that are useful. If not that set of ideas, then another set of ideas.
Dr. Rajamohan?
There were two views we've heard today. I think one, you're talking about strengthening the pan-regional IORA. Other is, focus on the smaller areas like Bay of Bengal, maybe where you can actually get more concrete things done rather than the full region-based thing. And I think that also applies to the Indo-Pacific as a whole. And third model is the smaller plurilateral institutions, like whether it's a Quad or whether a lot of trilateral arrangements that have emerged across the region between different countries, twos and threes and fours. So within these three, is there a way we can imagine mutually reinforcing way we can work at all the three levels?
I think in practice it's very hard to engineer because there are different memberships, different parts of the broader region, and sometimes focused on slightly different sets of issues. But I do think it's not a case of either or, and certainly Australian diplomacy, our broad approach to the region, is definitely based on a multi-layered approach. So I didn't talk at all about Australia's bilateral relations in the region, but we are investing very heavily in the strength of our bilateral ties across the Indo-Pacific in a multi-dimensional way, everything from economics to security and all that goes in the middle. We work very hard in a variety of regional organisations. ASEAN as an institution is incredibly important to us. When we're a member of an organisation, we don't like to coast in it, so we try to make a practical and constructive contribution. And we do see the minilateralism as another layer of this approach to the region, and for us, all of them are important.
Thank you. I now request Professor Sunaina Singh, Vice Chancellor, Nalanda University, which happens to be a larger, Nalanda is based in India, but has been supported and is supported by a number of countries in the Indo-Pacific. Our Vice Chancellor, Professor Sunaina Singh. We are getting tired. Thank you very much. Thank you. And our last speaker for this session before we break for tea, Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs from Vietnam, Mr. Nguyen Van Thao. He has been a Director General of the Department of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs before this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to speak at the 4th Indian Ocean Conference in Maldives today. At the outset, please allow me to join with our speaker to extend my sincere appreciation to the India Foundation and S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies for organizing the conference, and also extended to my sincere thanks to the government of Maldives for hosting this important event. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the Indian Ocean, as you know, has a great strategic importance. It connects Asia, the Middle East, and Africa with Europe and America via major sea lanes that carry 2/3 of the global oil shipment and 1/3 of bulk cargo. It hosts 23 among the 100 top container ports of the world. Due to the high volume of oil, gas, and cargo transported through the regional sea lane, together with the growing global and regional trade linkage and energy demand, the Indian Ocean has become increasingly critical to international trade, navigation, and energy security. The Indian Ocean, also known for being rich in terms of the resources, it holds 17% of the world's proven oil and 28% of the natural gas reserve. It is also responsible for more than 30% of the global fish capture in recent years. But it is not just about trade, navigation, energy, and resources. Due to its strategic importance, the Indian Ocean region is a home to evolving geopolitical realistic, including those related to the major power relation. Nearly half of the world's armed conflicts are presently located in the Indian region. There exists various territorial and maritime disputes in the Indian Ocean region that may erupt into armed conflict if not being properly managed and resolved. These challenges have also been accompanied by rising concern over the non-traditional security challenges. They include, among others, piracy, armed robbery, maritime terrorist act, crime, sea level rising, natural disaster, and serious degradation of the marine environment by human activity. In order to address these traditional and non-traditional maritime security challenges, it is vital for all states within and beyond the India-Ocean region to work together. And as we work together, it is extremely important that we follow the same set of rules and standards and base our action and common legal framework. Without a common framework of rules and norms, our fight against these challenges would not be durable. Our cooperation would be much harder, and as a result, the peace, security, and development in the Indian Ocean would not be sustainable. It is widely agreed that the Ocean comprehensively laid down the legal basis for the establishment of all maritime zones that the coastal state can claim for their land territory, as well as the right and obligation of the coastal state and other states in this maritime zone. As the convention addresses all major law of the sea matter relating to the Indian Ocean, including navigation regime and conservation of the sustainable use of maritime resources, all coastal states in the Indian Ocean region and maritime users should use UNCLOS as a foundation for their maritime conduct and maritime activity. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, as a coastal state in the South China Sea, which is a strategically interconnected into the Indian Ocean, the Vietnam attaches a great importance to maritime security in both the Indian Ocean and in the South China Sea. The August last year, the third the Indian Convention was held in Hanoi. We believe that the transboundary nature of the challenges before us requires cooperation and collective responses. We have therefore made a numerous and hard effort to strengthen and expand our cooperation with other states to address the traditional and non-traditional security challenges and contribute to the maritime peace, stability, cooperation, and development in the region. In this regard, we see the ASEAN with a central role in promoting cooperation and maintaining the peace and stability in the South China Sea. Recently, there have been a complex development in the South China Sea that have put the regional security, peace, and stability at risk. At the recently concluded the 52nd ASEAN Foreign Minister meeting and related meeting, representatives of many states spoke frankly on unilateral action undertaken in the South China Sea in violation of UNCLOS and infringe sovereign rights and jurisdiction of the coastal state. In their joint communique, ASEAN foreign ministers expressed their concern on land reclamation activity and serious incidents in the area, which have eroded trust and confidence, increased the tension, and may undermine peace, security, and stability in the region. In the face of this development, more than ever, states in the Indian Ocean region and other members of the international community need to stand firm in upholding the rule of law in the ocean, calling for compliance with UNCLOS and settlement of maritime dispute in accordance with the international law, supporting the sovereign rights and all lawful uses of the sea by the coastal state, and opposing unilateral action that violate international law, escalates tension, and adversely affect the maintenance of the peace, stability, security, and safety of navigation and overfly in the South China Sea. It is the interest of all states within and beyond the region and of the international community as a whole to continue to promote the peace, security, stability, and preserve the rule of law, freedom of navigation and overfly, and unimpeded lawful maritime commerce in the South China Sea, perhaps even more so in uncertain times. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, as we are facing a lot of the traditional and non-traditional challenges in the ASEAN, the Fourth Indian-Ocean Conference has provided a very valuable opportunity for all of us to share our perspective on the current problems and our insight into way and means to address this problem and create an open, inclusive, peaceful, security, and prosperous in the Indian Ocean. I hope that we will continue our open and candid discussion on this subject matter in the year to come. I wish all participants of the conference a good health and great success. Thank you very, very much for your attention.
Please, our former Indian ambassador to Vietnam. She has a question.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Excellency, and thank you for that important presentation. You did talk about unilateral action and the tensions in the South China Sea. We have been reading the news, and you did talk about the ASEAN Foreign Minister statement. We are aware that the 10 ASEAN countries, or certainly the 5 involved ones in the overlapping claims and disputes, have been trying to work on a DOC, through a DOC to a code of conduct, which hasn't worked out so far. Vietnam has an experience in the Gulf of Tonkin to have sorted it out bilaterally. Philippines failed, in spite of the tribunal's judgment being in favor, get an enforcement on the UNCLOS, which you did give primacy to. So which forum would you think, in the current standoff that you've had on certainly the oil explorations in your economic zone, your continental shelf, which for Vietnam appears to be the best forum, quite apart from raising it in important conferences like this one or in the ASEAN framework? How do you foresee resolving the current standoffs that you're having on account of unilateral actions being taken? Which would be the best forum in your opinion?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would like to share with you my view on this issue. First of all, the South China Sea is a very important maritime route. It's not only for the ASEAN country. It's connected between the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. And any dispute and the tension of the South China Sea will have a bad impact for all over the world, not all ASEAN countries. That's why the first thing we believe that any issue related about the South China Sea is a global issue, regional issue, not only the issue between the Vietnam and other countries. The second one, for the ASEAN includes 10 member states. And the most important thing for the ASEAN is unity. And the very important principle for the ASEAN is the consensus. That's why for the last month in Bangkok, at the ASEAN Foreign Minister meeting, all of the ministers of the ASEAN country showing the seriously concerned about the incident at the South China Sea. And also we have the joint communique to showing the concern of all of the ASEAN country with this issue, not only for Vietnam. The third one, in order to solve this problem, we think that all of the tension should be solving based on international law, especially with the South China Sea. We think that is the United Nations on the Convention of the Law of the Sea. It's very important for the country in the region to solving this problem. Between the China and the ASEAN country, we have the DOC. But DOC is not enough effective to solving the problem. That's why now, 10 member states of the ASEAN country, we work with the China for the COC. But the most important thing that we need is a good and reasonable COC in order to control and solving the problem. For the case of the Philippines with China in 2016, I think that Vietnam is an independent country. We have to think and choose the best way for our country. We do not copy any the lesson from other country because each country have a special condition. So that for the Vietnam, we think that we need the support, firstly from all ASEAN member states, because ASEAN is the member, ASEAN is the family, the community. The second one, we need to support from the international community, because we need to respect the international law. And for some country like Vietnam, maybe some other country in the world, we believe that this is the best way to solving the dispute and problem in South China Sea with the peaceful method. Yes.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of this. We now request Dr. Sonu Trivedi to come up and to honor our speaker, Mr. Nguyen Van Thao. After the tea break, when we convene, we have to still hear 3 countries of the Western Indo-Pacific: Madagascar, Kenya, and Comoros. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Let's break for not 30 minutes, but only 20 minutes. Come back, as I said, 3 countries of the Western Indian Ocean we haven't heard. We'll hear from them.